Growing up, I quickly learned that my birthday was not a special day. It was something to tiptoe around, a quiet reminder that in my family, there were more important things to celebrate. Carol and Richard, my parents, made it clear early on that their wedding anniversary, which fell exactly on the same day as my birthday, took absolute priority. My earliest memory of a birthday was when I turned 5. I sat on the front steps of our house, a peeling faded blue bungalow that smelled like damp wood and mothballs, clutching a handmade paper crown I had made at preschool. I waited and waited, sure that at any moment someone would burst out the front door with a cake or balloons. Instead, the door opened to my mother, Carol, shrieking at my father because he hadn't picked up her anniversary flowers in time. She barely glanced at me as I sat there, my party dress wrinkled and my crown sliding off my head. By the time I was 8, the pattern was firmly set. Every year, Carol and Richard would host a grand anniversary party at our house. They invited friends, neighbors, relatives, everyone but me, it felt like. I wasn't excluded outright, but there was an unspoken rule: blend into the background. Be polite, smile when spoken to, and under no circumstances mention that it was also your birthday. There was this one year when Aunt Brenda, my mom's half-sister who nobody really liked, showed up drunk and loud. She leaned down to me, her breath thick with gin, and slurred, "Aren't you the birthday girl?" Before I could answer, my mother was there, grabbing Brenda's arm, fake laughing, dragging her away as she hissed something under her breath. I spent the rest of that party locked in my room with my ear pressed to the door, listening to the clink of glasses and the sound of laughter that had nothing to do with me. At school, it wasn't much better. Kids would talk about their birthday parties, magicians, pony rides, backyard sleepovers. I lied. I made up stories about imaginary parties, imaginary gifts, even imaginary friends who couldn't make it but sent a card. It was easier than admitting the truth. Every year, I stood on the sidelines of my own life, a footnote to someone else's celebration. As I got older, things only got worse. When I turned 12, they decided to throw a massive anniversary bash at a country club 30 miles away. It was fancy, with white tablecloths and a string quartet and waiters carrying trays of champagne. I spent the evening sitting at the kids' table with distant cousins I barely knew. No one acknowledged my birthday. When I finally worked up the courage to mention it to my mother, she squeezed my hand and said, "Don't be selfish, Macy. This is a big night for us." Us never included me. There were a few people who tried to slip me kindness now and then. Mrs. Templeton, our elderly neighbor, once baked me a lopsided chocolate cake and left it on our doorstep. My parents found it before I did and threw it away, muttering about how inappropriate it was for people to overstep their bounds. Another year, my 4th grade teacher, Ms. Rivera, gave me a small wrapped present, a notebook with a soft leather cover. I hid it under my bed like it was contraband, writing in it late at night by flashlight, pouring my anger and loneliness onto its pages. I wasn't completely alone in the house either. I had a brother, Jake, 2 years older, but he was their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He basked in the attention, using it to get whatever he wanted. He wasn't cruel to me directly, but he was indifferent, which somehow hurt even more. One birthday, when I was 9, he offered me a half-eaten candy bar as a gift, laughing when I hesitated to take it. "You should be grateful," he said, tossing it onto my bed. At least someone remembered. There were no happy birthday songs, no candles, no gifts. My parents' anniversary gifts to each other grew more extravagant each year: diamond earrings, weekend getaways, even a new car once. But there was never anything for me. I learned not to expect it. Expectation only led to disappointment, and disappointment sat heavy in my chest like a stone. One year, when I was 13, I decided to plan my own birthday. I saved up lunch money for months, secretly buying decorations and cheap snacks. I invited 2 friends from school, Amanda and Jess, telling them it would be a small get-together at my house. I didn't tell my parents. The day came. I decorated the garage with streamers and balloons, set up a small table with chips and soda. Amanda and Jess arrived, laughing and carrying little gift bags. For a moment, it felt magical, like maybe somehow I had broken the curse. Then Carol found us. She was furious, livid that I had ruined the aesthetic of their anniversary by cluttering the garage with cheap junk. She screamed at me in front of my friends, tearing down the decorations with manic energy. Amanda and Jess fled, and I stood there, surrounded by the remnants of my attempt at happiness, feeling smaller than I ever had before. That night, Richard cornered me in the hallway. "Don't you ever embarrass your mother like that again," he said, his voice low and full of controlled rage. "Do you have any idea how much tonight meant to her?" I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. After that, I stopped trying. I became invisible on my birthdays, melting into the walls, careful not to draw attention. The only celebration I allowed myself was in secret. Late at night, I would sit by the window, eat a single stolen cupcake from the fridge, and whisper, "Happy birthday, Macy," to the empty dark. By the time I turned 15, I barely felt anything at all when the day came around. That year, my parents went on a week-long cruise for their anniversary. They left me and Jake with a sitter, a disinterested woman named Shelley, who spent most of her time smoking on the porch and talking on the phone with her boyfriend. On my birthday, Shelley gave me a fistful of crumpled bills from her purse and told me to order a pizza or something. I used the money to buy myself a small vanilla cake from the grocery store. I ate it alone in my room with a plastic fork, not even bothering to light a candle. There were moments, tiny moments, when I fantasized that maybe things would change. Maybe Carol and Richard would realize they had a daughter worth celebrating. But deep down, I knew better. I wasn't their priority. I never had been. Their love was reserved for each other, an exclusive club that I was born into but never truly a part of. Once, during an argument when I was 16, I screamed at my mother, "Why did you even have me if you didn't want me?" She slapped me across the face so fast I didn't see it coming. The room spun, and for a moment, I tasted blood. "This family is about love and commitment," she hissed. "Don't you dare question that." After that, I never brought it up again. Instead, I started to build a quiet rebellion inside myself. I began saving up from part-time jobs, planning for the day I could leave and never look back. I told myself that someday, my birthday would belong to me alone. I would celebrate it however I wanted, big or small, surrounded by people who cared or just by myself. It didn't matter. What mattered was that it would finally be mine. Until then, I counted down the days year after year, watching as Carol and Richard celebrated themselves with champagne and grand gestures, never once noticing the daughter standing silently in the corner, growing colder and colder with each passing year. Turning 30 felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Looking down, I could see every miserable birthday that had passed, every forgotten moment, every hollow smile at my parents' anniversary parties while I clapped politely for a love story that never included me. So I decided it would be different. This time, I was going to take everything they cared about, the show, the attention, the spotlight, and make it mine. I spent months planning it. Secretly. Methodically. I drained my savings, scraped together bonuses from overtime at the marketing firm I worked at, and maxed out a credit card I wasn't even supposed to have. Over $8,000 went into this night. I rented out the Lancaster House, an extravagant manor known for hosting upscale weddings and galas. Chandeliers, marble floors, a courtyard with a dam fountain. I hired a professional catering company, Ambrosia Delights, and paid extra for the platinum package. Lobster rolls, filet mignon, a dessert station taller than me. I booked a live band, the Silver Echoes, who specialized in 70s rock ballads, my parents' favorite genre. On paper, it was a surprise 35th wedding anniversary party for Carol and Richard. But in truth, it was a coronation for me. Invitations were sent weeks in advance. Custom foil-stamped cards reading, "Help us honor Carol and Richard's enduring love at a special celebration. Formal attire required. No children, please." I knew the wording would please my mother. She always hated messy little kids at adult events. I had the guest list stacked with dozens of people. My parents' old friends, their country club acquaintances, a few coworkers from my own job, and some people they barely knew but would feel flattered to recognize them. I even invited Mrs. Templeton, my old neighbor who once tried to bake me a birthday cake when I was a child. The whole plan was a knife hidden inside a bouquet of roses. The night arrived. I wore a floor-length deep red dress that made me look and feel like royalty. My hair was pinned up into an intricate braided crown, and my makeup was sharp enough to cut glass. As guests began to arrive, the air inside Lancaster House practically hummed with excitement. Laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of roasted garlic and champagne filled every corner. Jake showed up first. My brother hadn't changed much since high school, still smug, still certain the world owed him something. He came with a date, some bleach blonde woman named Tiffany who didn't even pretend to be interested in anyone else. "Wow," Jake said, looking around. "Guess someone hit the lottery." I smiled sweetly. It's a special occasion. Carol and Richard arrived 10 minutes late, of course. It was their custom to make an entrance. Carol wore a gold dress that looked stiff and uncomfortable. Richard was in a tailored black suit with a red rose pinned to his lapel. When they stepped through the doors and everyone turned to clap, I watched Carol's face bloom with satisfaction. She drank in the admiration like oxygen. There was a slow build of greetings, hugs, fake kisses on cheeks. The band played a soft instrumental version of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Carol teared up theatrically. Richard put his hand on her back like he was claiming a prize. For the first hour, everything moved perfectly. I circulated through the crowd, smiling, thanking people for coming, dodging backhanded compliments from Carol's friends. "You really pulled this together? All by yourself?" asked Lydia, Carol's best friend and a lifelong snob. "I guess some people surprise you," I said, sipping my champagne. The real surprise was still coming. At 8 p.m., I stepped onto the small stage set up at the front of the ballroom. I tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," I called. The room quieted. I saw Carol beam at me, hands clasped to her chest. Richard gave me a thumbs up. "I just want to say how honored I am to have you all here tonight," I began. My voice was steady clear. "It's not every day we get to celebrate such an important milestone. 35 years of love, commitment, and partnership." Polite applause. "But tonight isn't just about Carol and Richard," I said, my tone sharpening slightly. "Tonight, we celebrate something else. Something long overdue." A murmur went through the crowd. Carol's smile wavered. "You see, 30 years ago today, another life began," I continued. "A life that grew up in the shadow of this marriage. A life that learned the importance of surviving neglect, of finding strength without support, of building dreams with no blueprints." I watched their faces turn pale. "Tonight, we celebrate me." Silence. Sharp, stunned, absolute silence. I heard a glass shatter somewhere near the bar. Jake cursed under his breath. I smiled, bright and vicious. "Happy 30th birthday to me." Before anyone could react, the band launched into a blistering rendition of Eye of the Tiger. The lights shifted from soft gold to pulsing red and blue. Waiters began bringing out trays of sparkling birthday cupcakes, no anniversary cake in sight. A giant banner unfurled over the dance floor. Macy's 30th, long overdue. Chaos erupted. Carol's face crumpled like wet paper. She grabbed Richard's arm, sputtering something I couldn't hear over the music. Some of their friends looked horrified, others looked amused. Lydia looked like she might actually faint. Jake stormed up to the stage, hissing, "Are you insane?" I leaned into the microphone. "If you'd like to leave, feel free. But the open bar stays open for 3 more hours." That shut him up. Jake wasn't the type to walk away from free whiskey. I danced. I laughed. I took selfies with people who were just drunk enough to think it was hilarious. I posed in front of the giant ice sculpture of the number 30 I had commissioned. I toasted myself with vintage champagne, surrounded by strangers who didn't know or care about the decades of quiet suffering that had led to this moment. Not everyone stayed, of course. About half of my parents' friends made a swift, scandalized exit within the first 20 minutes. Carol and Richard hung on for a while, trying to maintain dignity, but eventually they too left. Carol sobbing into her designer clutch, Richard glaring daggers at me the entire way out. Mrs. Templeton stayed, though. She found me near the dessert station, gave me a slow, approving nod, and handed me a small, slightly crumpled gift bag. Inside was a tiny silver locket shaped like a heart. "You deserve a better family," she said simply. It almost broke me, right there, but I swallowed it down and smiled instead. By the end of the night, my feet hurt, my head was buzzing, and my bank account was obliterated. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like an afterthought. I was the center of the story. Finally, as I sat in the empty ballroom at 2 a.m. barefoot, cradling a half-finished bottle of champagne, I realized I hadn't just changed the rules that night. I had thrown the whole damn rulebook into the fire. No more waiting for someone else to celebrate me. No more hoping to be seen. This was only the beginning. The ballroom of the Lancaster house looked like a dream, bathed in soft golden light, with tables dressed in ivory linens and crystal centerpieces that caught every glimmer. From the outside, it seemed like the perfect celebration. Exactly the kind of event my parents would have loved, if it had been about them. I stood near the entrance, watching as the guests trickled in. Carol's old friend from college, Vivian, wearing a stiff navy dress, whispering loudly to her husband Bernard about how opulent everything looked. Richard's golf buddies from the Elmridge Country Club swaggered in, already scanning the bar. Even Pastor Jenkins, the man who had married my parents, arrived with his new, much younger wife, a woman named Marcy who seemed to blink in confusion at the grandeur. Everyone thought they were here to celebrate Carol and Richard's 35th anniversary. No one was ready for what was actually going to happen. Least of all my parents. As the last of the guests settled with cocktails in hand, the lights dimmed slightly. A low buzz of polite conversation filled the room. Jake, my brother, shot me a suspicious glance from across the hall. He still didn't trust what I was up to, but even he couldn't guess the scale of it. The first notes of soft piano music floated through the speakers. Then the giant projector screen at the front of the ballroom flickered to life. At first, everyone smiled, expecting a classic slideshow of Carol and Richard's life together. Their wedding photos. The years of vacations, new homes, anniversaries past. But that's not what they got. The first image was a baby in a pink knitted cap. Me. The next slide, a toddler sitting alone at a birthday table with no guests around, a drooping balloon tied to her chair. Captioned, "Macy's 3rd birthday, celebrated alone." A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Vivian frown. Bernard leaned forward. The photos kept coming. Year after year. A picture of me at 7, standing in a hallway at one of my parents' anniversary parties, holding a present with no one to give it to. Me at 10, blowing out candles on a store-bought cupcake in a dark kitchen. Me at 16, sitting alone on a swing set, wearing a paper crown that was sliding off my head. Each picture had captions. While Carol and Richard celebrated their love, Macy celebrated being forgotten. Another year, another silent wish no one heard. Invisible in her own home, there was no way to misinterpret it. I stood off to the side of the screen, champagne flute in hand, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the stunned silence. Then came the video clips. One showed my mother in her glittering dress, laughing with friends while I hovered awkwardly in the background, barely acknowledged. Another showed Richard giving a toast at a party, to the best years of our lives. In the background, you could hear my small voice ask, "Daddy, can I have some cake?" Ignored. By now, some guests were exchanging uncomfortable looks. Lydia, Carol's best friend, whispered something harsh into her husband's ear. Pastor Jenkins wiped his forehead with a napkin. Carol sat frozen, her smile hollowing out into something ghostly. Richard shifted angrily in his seat. The final clip was the worst, a recording from my 13th birthday attempt. The garage decorated with dollar store streamers. Me, standing proudly next to a lopsided cake. Then Carol storming in, screaming, "You ruin everything, Macy." Then the decorations being ripped down. When the screen went black, there was a beat of stunned silence. You could hear the clink of a dropped fork from across the room. I walked slowly to the stage. I didn't rush. I let them stew in it. When I reached the microphone, I took a deep breath and smiled, not sweetly, but with steel behind my teeth. "Good evening," I said clearly, my voice carrying over the silent room. "I know many of you came here tonight expecting to celebrate 35 years of Carol and Richard's love story. Their triumph. Their fairy tale. And for a long time, I believed that story too." I scanned the crowd. Faces stared back at me, some horrified, some sympathetic, some, like Jake, blank and furious. But behind every perfect picture, there's a truth you don't see. The truth is, while they celebrated themselves every year with grand parties and champagne toasts, their daughter celebrated her birthdays alone. Forgotten. Ignored. Silenced. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I stood taller. I was told not to be selfish. That love meant sacrifice. That being invisible was the price of belonging. But tonight, I'm done being invisible. Behind me, servers wheeled out the cake. Not the elegant white anniversary cake Carol had ordered for herself, but a towering, glittering, gaudy confection with gold sparkles, crowned with flaming candles. The words piped across it in bold red icing read, "Happy 30th to me." The room gasped. Even the band, tuning their instruments in the corner, stopped mid-note. Carol shot to her feet. "You manipulative little brat," she screeched. "How dare you ruin our night?" Richard was red-faced, sputtering incoherently. I didn't flinch. "This was never your night," I said, my voice like a blade. "It was always mine. You just didn't bother to notice." A woman I didn't recognize, someone from my marketing firm, maybe, clapped once loudly. Then a few more people. And suddenly there was a smattering of applause, hesitant but growing. Carol looked around, realizing finally, she was losing her audience. "You're sick," she spat at me. "Ungrateful. We gave you everything." I laughed then, actually laughed. "Everything? Like what? A seat at the kids' table? A lifetime subscription to silence? Save your lies for someone who still believes them." Richard grabbed Carol's arm and yanked her toward the exit. Several of their friends followed, Vivian glaring daggers at me as she passed. Others lingered awkwardly, caught between loyalty and curiosity. Jake stormed up to the stage again. "You're disgusting," he hissed. "You think this makes you the good guy?" I smiled at him. "No, Jake. It makes me free." He shoved past me, muttering curses. One by one, the old life peeled away. And what remained? The people who mattered. The ones who stayed, like Mrs. Templeton, her wrinkled hand squeezing my arm gently. Some of the younger guests from work. Even the band, who shrugged and started playing upbeat music again. The rest of the night blurred into color and noise. There was dancing. There was drinking. There was an enormous slice of that ridiculous cake, sweet and dizzying on my tongue. I posed for pictures, laughed until my stomach hurt, let strangers toast me. No more sidelines. No more swallowed birthdays. It wasn't just a party. It was the funeral of their narrative, and the beginning of my own. After that night at Lancaster House, the fallout came faster than I ever imagined. At first, it was quiet. When I woke up the next morning in my tiny apartment, still wearing my dress from the night before, my lipstick smeared, the faint scent of champagne lingering, there were no angry calls, no frantic texts. For a moment, I let myself believe it might just blow over. That illusion shattered by noon. The first call was from Carol. I let it ring, not even bothering to pick up. But her voicemail, furious, trembling, filled up my inbox within minutes. "You humiliated us. You embarrassed this entire family. You are dead to me, Macy." The second call was from Richard. Shorter, colder. "I hope you're happy. Don't ever contact us again." Good, I thought bitterly. Saves me the trouble. But then things escalated beyond the family drama. It wasn't just personal anymore. It became public. It started when Vivian, my mother's longtime friend, the one who had gasped like a dying fish during my slideshow, posted about the disgraceful event on her Facebook page. She painted a vivid picture, a troubled young woman hijacking her parents' celebration for a twisted vendetta, humiliating them, in front of God and community. It went semi-viral, at least, in the tiny poisonous world my parents inhabited. Suddenly, people who barely knew me were weighing in. Carol's Pilates instructor, posting about how sad it is when children turn on their parents. Richard's business partner's wife, sharing a passive-aggressive post about honoring those who raised you instead of airing grievances. Even Pastor Jenkins' new wife, Marcy, made a snide comment on Instagram about how some people crave attention more than healing. I told myself I didn't care. But the real blow came 3 days later. I lost my biggest client. Jameson Hart, a boutique real estate agency I had managed marketing for over 2 years, called me into an urgent meeting. I sat across from Martin Hart, a slick tan man in his 50s who wore too much cologne and liked to think he was younger than he was, and his new social media manager, a 25-year-old named Brooke who wore a permanent fake smile. Martin didn't mince words. "Macy, we value professionalism," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "But your personal drama has become too public. Our clients are concerned." I knew what he meant. Their clients, Carol and Richard's friends, were concerned. Concerned that associating with me would tarnish their image. I nodded numb. "Effective immediately," he added, pushing a folder across the table. "Severance. Barely enough to cover 2 months' rent." As I packed up my things from the office, I caught Brooke smirking at me. I wanted to scream. To tell her to enjoy the shallow, fake world she was so eager to swim in. Instead, I walked out with my head high. That afternoon, 2 more clients quietly dropped me. No official explanation, just polite emails about reevaluating our needs and taking a different direction. Within a week, I had lost over half my freelance income. Meanwhile, the messages kept coming. Some supportive, like my old English teacher, Ms. Rivera, who messaged me privately. "You were always so strong, Maisie. I'm proud of you for speaking up." Or Mrs. Templeton, who brought over a homemade lasagna and left it on my doorstep with a note. Families can be built, not just born. Even a few people from the party, young professionals I barely knew, reached out, saying they admired what I had done. One woman, Alicia, wrote, "I wish I had the courage to call out my own parents the way you did." But the hate drowned it out. Anonymous emails, nasty DMs, even a handwritten letter slipped under my apartment door, calling me a selfish, ungrateful wretch who deserved to be alone. Jake texted me once. "Hope it was worth it. You destroyed everything." I didn't respond. It wasn't like I could call my parents to fix it. Carol and Richard had blocked me everywhere. Phone, email, social media. As far as they were concerned, I was erased. I thought about reaching out to Jake, trying to explain. But what was the point? He had always lived in their light. He would never see what it was like to live in their shadow. The only ones who stayed were the ones who saw me, really saw me. Like Elena, a woman from my old college class, who invited me to a small book club gathering. Or Marcus, a bartender from the party who sent me a free drink voucher with a note. For the bravest woman I've ever seen with a mic. Small things. But they mattered. I needed them because the practical consequences hit hard. Bills piled up. Rent loomed. The debt from the $8,000 party, sitting heavy on my shoulders. I picked up temp jobs, copywriting for shady websites, transcribing interviews at 2 a.m., even dog walking through an app that paid barely minimum wage. Some nights I cried so hard I could barely breathe. Not because I regretted it, but because the world had shown me how little space it had for truth-tellers. Meanwhile, Carol and Richard spun their own narrative. They hosted a smaller, redemptive anniversary dinner at their country club 2 weeks later. No mention of me. Photos of their beautiful, blessed marriage flooded social media, their friends posting gushing comments about how real love overcomes all trials. It was surreal, watching them rewrite reality in real time. At first, I felt furious. Then hollow. Then finally free. Because no matter how many lies they told, the truth lived in the slideshow that had lit up Lancaster House. It lived in the faces of the people who clapped. It lived in me. One evening, about a month later, I ran into Vivian at the grocery store. She looked me up and down, my cheap jeans, my tired face, with pure disdain. "I hope you're happy," she said coldly. "You got what you wanted." I smiled at her, a real smile, for the first time in my life. "No, Vivian," I said, pushing my cart past her. "I got what I deserved. And for the first time, I actually meant it." Weeks after the chaos at Lancaster House, I knew it was inevitable. I had to face them. Carol and Richard. Not over voicemail, not through seething texts or furious Facebook posts, but in person. If I was serious about changing the way my life worked, I had to confront the root of it. They agreed to meet under the stiffest, most transactional circumstances imaginable. Neutral ground, no screaming, no scenes. Richard's lawyer, Alan Redman, actually drafted a pathetic email suggesting terms for a civil meeting. I ignored the legal drama and picked the spot myself. The Elmwood Inn, a quiet, upscale restaurant where none of their friends would witness the explosion I knew was coming. The day of the meeting, I wore a sharp navy pantsuit I borrowed from Elena, the college friend who had stood by me through everything. I tied my hair into a tight bun, wore minimal makeup, no jewelry. I wanted to strip the night of any pretense. This wasn't about looking pretty. It was about being heard. I arrived first. The restaurant was nearly empty, just a few older couples sipping wine in the corner. Soft piano music tinkled through hidden speakers. The waiter, a thin, nervous young man named Kyle, recognized my name from the reservation list and led me to a private back room. I waited and waited. Finally, 30 minutes late, they arrived. Carol swept into the room like a queen whose throne had been insulted. Richard followed, his mouth set in a hard, thin line. Neither of them looked at me right away. Carol adjusted the strap of her cream designer handbag. Richard shrugged out of his expensive-looking coat with a grimace. Without a word, they sat down across from me. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. Kyle approached tentatively with water menus. I waved him away. I stared at them waiting. I wouldn't speak first. I had done enough chasing in my life. Carol broke first. "So," she said, her voice like ice sliding over glass, "you've made yourself quite famous." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Congratulations." I didn't blink. "I didn't do it for fame," I said quietly. "I did it because it was the truth." Richard snorted. "Truth? You humiliated us. You ambushed your own family. You destroyed any chance we had at dignity." "My dignity was never even considered," I shot back. Carol leaned forward, nails tapping the tablecloth. "You embarrassed yourself far more than you embarrassed us, Maisie. People talk. They pity you." I laughed. A short, humorless bark. They can pity me all they want. Pity isn't half as bad as being invisible. They exchanged a look. That same silent communication they had always used, the one that said we're united, and you are the outsider. Richard folded his hands. What do you want, Macy? Money? An apology. Typical. I don't want anything from you, I said, my voice steady. I asked to meet because I need you to understand something. I let the words hang in the air. From now on, I said slowly, clearly, I will celebrate myself. Loudly. Proudly. Without apology. Carol's mouth opened, but I raised a hand, cutting her off. I'm not asking for permission. I'm not asking for approval. I'm telling you, you don't get to ignore me anymore. You don't get to pretend I'm a prop in your perfect marriage photos. You don't get to make me feel small, or selfish, or guilty for existing. Their faces froze. I could see the fury building under Carol's powdered cheeks, the vein pulsing in Richard's temple. Too bad. They didn't get to speak first this time. They didn't get to rewrite my story. I spent 30 years waiting for you to see me, I said. Now, I see myself. And I will never, not for a single day, put myself on the back burner for you again. Carol's eyes gleamed with anger. You ungrateful. I'm done. I stood up, pushing my chair back quietly. Kyle hovered nearby, sensing the tension, pretending to wipe down a perfectly clean table. I caught his eye and nodded toward the door. He approached and said softly, Would you like me to bring the check, ma'am? I smiled. For their drinks. I'm not staying. Carol stood too, her voice sharp and brittle. You'll regret this, Macy. You'll grow old and bitter and alone. I looked her dead in the eye. I'd rather be alone than invisible. Then I turned and walked out. The first weeks after the confrontation were a strange kind of freedom. Lonely, sure. There were moments I stared at my phone, half expecting some grand apology that would never come. Instead, silence. Fine by me. I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I found a tiny shared office space downtown, an ugly building with flickering fluorescent lights, but it was mine. I started picking up freelance projects again, this time from people who didn't care about Carol and Richard's cocktail party gossip. One of my first new clients was Ruby Klein, a fierce, tattooed entrepreneur who ran a bakery/bookstore hybrid called Sugar Spine. I heard what you did, Ruby said, grinning as she shook my hand. Ballsy. I like it. There was Dr. Hannah Singh, a therapist specializing in family estrangement, who hired me to design a new website for her. You don't owe toxic people anything, she said simply, sliding the signed contract across the table. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to breathe again. For my 31st birthday, I didn't wait for anyone to celebrate me. I threw a massive rooftop party. No fake smiles. No pretending. No shrinking myself to fit into someone else's idea of family. I wore a red dress again, brighter, bolder. I ordered a 3-tiered cake covered in edible glitter. I hired a band that played everything from Queen to Lizzo. The guest list included people I had chosen. Elena, Marcus from the bar, Ruby, Dr. Singh, a few new friends from co-working spaces, and even Kyle the waiter, who turned out to be studying graphic design on the side. At midnight, standing under the stars, holding a glass of champagne, I made a toast. To everyone who ever felt like they were too much or not enough. To everyone who had to celebrate themselves when no one else would. Tonight, we are seen. Cheers erupted around me. For the first time, the joy felt real. Not borrowed. Not stolen. Mine.